when they were saying about the conditions that they were under, having to drink toilet water, woken up at all hours of the night, having dogs at them, standing outside having to undress. I mean, I think that's just so humiliating. And I think for me, as a wife, it was heartbreaking. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I was just waiting for some kind of word and just to know that he was okay.
Welcome to This Week in Africa. Today's top story is South African activists that were detained in Israel finally come home. And also some other stories related to Julius Malema being convicted, new leadership installed in countries, and other stories from around the world. Sorry, we are late today, but we will just jump right into it. So we'll do our introductions before we get into today's story. So I'll turn it over to my co-host to do her introduction before I introduce myself.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Gloria Ayo. I am founder and host of The African Story, a show that it's my own little podcast. But yeah, what I do is delve into African history, and my way of, I guess, contributing to current affairs is actually through this platform, courtesy of Authentic African. So I'm very excited to be back.
Awesome. Yes. And Gloria's platform is blowing up. She does a great job of telling you about today's stories, the context, historical context of different leaders. I've watched a few of those videos over the last couple of weeks. I don't spend much time on Instagram, but I do watch stories.
Thanks for giving me time in spite of the schedule.
Yeah, you guys don't know what my schedule is like behind the scenes, but it's nuts. And so, yeah, and I'm Joe Hatagwa, founder of Authentic African. Our goal is to help people do three things: visit, move, or invest in Africa, and invest in real estate in Africa. And we want to bridge the gap between those living on the continent and those living in the diaspora. And so back to today's stories, as mentioned, we will be discussing the 6 South African activists that were on the flotilla in Gaza that returned home after detention in Israel. There are lots of stories floating around about the flotilla, no pun intended. There's a lot of conversation about what's happened, and we want to ensure that we give you guys the update. There is an African angle on this, so that's why we're talking about this. Many people ask us to talk about Israel, and generally we don't, because Palestine, believe it or not, is not in Africa. You might believe it is when you hear so many Africans talking about it at the United Nations, which we talked about last week. But although it is an atrocity happening on a grand scale, there are many happening on the continent, and so we address continental issues first and foremost. And in this case, the South African activists do actually have a story that now has us able to report on what's happening with the Palestine and Israeli conflict. So with that, we will play a video and we will have some commentary on the other side.
6 South African activists who were on board the Gaza Humanitarian Aid Flotilla returned home on Wednesday after being released by Israeli authorities. Speaking after their return, they said they suffered mistreatment during their abduction and expressed solidarity with Palestinians. Among the activists receiving a warm hero's welcome at Johannesburg's airport was Nelson Mandela's grandson, Mandla Mandela.
We were subjected to all forms of brutality from then. But it's nothing compared to what Palestinians have been subjected to on a daily basis. We were kidnapped on international waters. Palestinians are attacked, maimed, and killed.
The activists said they were subjected to harsher treatment than other detainees due to South Africa's role in the genocide case against Israel.
On the Alma boat.
We are the ones who took Israel to the ICJ and ICC, so there is a bit of anger about that. And we don't have an embassy in Israel. We have our embassies in Ramallah in Palestine. So our consular officials tried to come to us. They tried to come to us even from Thursday, and they were not allowed. And then when they finally saw us, it was Sunday. And on Sunday, they were only really allowed like 2 minutes, and they said time up, and then we said no.
Israel has denied claims of mistreatment. The South African nationals were among some 450 activists arrested as Israeli forces intercepted the flotilla seeking to break Israel's Gaza blockade.
All right. So, Gloria, your thoughts on this story?
Man. Yeah. Obviously, the case is getting even more recognition. People are noticing it even more because of Nelson Mandela's grandson. And I mean, hearing things such as the hijabs of 2 Muslim women, being forcibly removed, people being stripped in front of Israeli soldiers, allegedly, things that did not happen to other detainees. Hearing that is actually very concerning. And activists are saying they were harshly dealt with, as we've heard, once they realized they were South African. And Israel has denied all allegations. It's stating that, no such thing happened.
Sure.
But if this is in fact proven to be true, I mean, come on, Israel, like, come on. We keep hearing all these horrifying cases. We've seen some, and if this is proven to be true, it will basically be a case of Israel, yet another case, or yet another confirmation of Israel punishing people, via imprisonment, or otherwise starvation, etc., for choosing to side with Palestine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just say, what they complained of is consistent with other complaints we've heard from other people detained and or imprisoned falsely and without due process by those of the government there. I will say that, I just wish this level of activism is taken and could be taken for countries on the continent of Africa. Getting humanitarian aid into Palestine into the Gaza Strip is to the utmost importance. And there are many countries focused on that. Where there aren't people focused is on South Sudan, on, the Congo, right? On what's happening in northern Nigeria, what's happening still in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, right? With these insurgent groups unaliving large numbers of people. It goes underreported, unreported, rarely discussed, except for on places like this. And these are the places that we as Africans should focus, because they do not focus on Africa when there is a need, right? And so I do think it's really important that we remember that. I think what happens a lot, and this is my own personal belief system, is that when there's a group of a lighter complected race committing an atrocity on a darker complected race, that is when people want to get involved from other places. When it's 2 groups that are of the same complexion, it almost never gets discussed except to condemn that group. Think about that anywhere in the world, right? In the United States, anywhere in the world, that's where we see people decide to become involved. We need to be involved on the continent more. I do understand that Nelson Mandela stood firm with Palestinians all throughout his time, as an activist and imprisonment, and when he was president and when he was out post-presidency. And so I do understand that South Africa does feel tied to it because, the idea of apartheid and eliminating it across the world is something that they all have talked about, and it's ingrained in South African society. But as I mentioned, you have to fly over conflicts happening in Africa to get to this conflict happening in Palestine. And so I do think it matters that we do spend a lot of time focused on what's happening on the continent. What happened to these folks is atrocious, and what continues to happen there is atrocious. And I just want to be clear that I don't support any of what is happening over in that part of the world. I just want to make sure we use this time to highlight what's happening on the continent of Africa, because it really does require as much spotlight as possible, because it gets overlooked always. So with that, we're going to stay in South Africa, moving on to Julius Malema and the fact that he was convicted of hate speech for urging supporters not to fear during the political rally. You guys might remember that big political rally that the Economic Freedom Fighters had. I think it was on the 10th anniversary of their party, if I'm not mistaken. And it was at a big football stadium, I think it was. And, you know, that was where he did the chant that was said throughout apartheid. And, you know, it was like, you know, I can't even say the words technically because YouTube, but it's, yeah, you can't say it. With the Boer, discussing the Boer, right? That's the only part of it that I can actually say. And so it's from anyone you speak to in South Africa, it's meant not to be a literal translation of unaliving white South Africans, but it's more along the lines of a chant of solidarity and ask for freedom. But anyway, we will play this video because it does seem South Africa may be a bit divided over this conviction.
The Boer chant was dismissed by South Africa's Constitutional Court as historic resistance. But this time the Equality Court ruled he had gone too far.
The court is very, very clear that all of us have got freedom of expression, but that freedom of expression should not, take place in a way that infringes the dignity of others. The court is very, very clear that political speech is welcome, political activism is welcome, but what is not allowed is propagation of hate speech or incitement to violence.
The EFF has hit back, calling it a grave distortion of history, philosophy, and the nature of political speech in a democratic society. The party will challenge the ruling at the Supreme Court of Appeal.
The Economic Freedom Fighters is very disappointed by the ruling of the Equality Court, because this also doesn't reflect previous legal rulings in understanding revolutionary language and context in South Africa. And it is definitely not a literal call to go and kill whites, but it is a call for strong action and revolutionary resistance to racism and to oppression.
Meanwhile, the Democratic Alliance Party within the ruling coalition hailed the decision.
For far too long, Julius Malema got away with hate speech and inciting violence in this country. The Democratic Alliance really welcomes this judgment. We cannot have it that a leader of a political party in this country asks for the killing of people.
The EFF insists its fight is not against white people, but against white supremacy.
Of course, leadership from the Democratic Alliance is going to object. And for those who don't remember, we've talked about this before. The Democratic Alliance is a majority European descent group that really focuses on the ultra wealthy Europeans living in South Africa. And they are part of the coalition that formed the government. The party that formerly was the home of Nelson Mandela actually decided to partner with the Democratic Alliance, or the DA, as opposed to the EFF, which Julius Malema is a part of, to form their coalition government, which is the ruling party today in South Africa. So just want to mention that so you guys can pull that all together, who was just speaking and why you see somebody looking like that speaking on behalf of a political party in South Africa. With that, thoughts on the hate speech conviction of Julius Malema?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Malema is a long-standing, highly visible, polarizing political figure in South Africa. The EFF is known for their positions on land expropriation, nationalization of resources, their fight towards racial and economic inequality. So, of course, he's going to be in the spotlight for this. And this is not his first legal tussle. Previously, he's been convicted for hate speech. But this particular ruling is actually coming in a period when the EFF is more influential. I mean, they've been talked about, even by Trump. They're gaining parliamentary seats. They're forming part of coalitions, etc. He's already signaled that he will appeal. But people are arguing that no one should be above the law. People who agree with the conviction. They say no leader should be allowed to brandish weapons publicly. However, critics, including the EFF or people who are against this conviction, they see it as political persecution. They see it as selective justice. They see it as a case of racial bias. But I do want to point out one key legal nuance that we should all note. Under South African constitutional rules, a member of parliament may be disqualified if sentenced to more than 1 year in prison without the option of a fine. This raises the stakes. If the sentence exceeds that threshold, Malema could actually lose his parliamentary seat and political office. So if a leader with such prominence is found guilty, there will definitely be ripple effects. There could be a leadership vacuum in the EFF. There could be fights for succession. Even the morale of its members could be affected. And this is because the EFF's identity is tightly bound to Malema.
Yeah, well put. I mean, he is the face of the party. That's how we are aware of the EFF. And he has been the most vocal. I mean, at one point in time in 2023, he was the most searched politician in South Africa over Ramaphosa. There was a time where people did not even know who the president's name was, but they knew who Malema was. And I remember when I was becoming aware of Malema at that time, we posted a lot about him on Authentic African. We've reported about him throughout the years, his failed attempts at the presidency there in South Africa. He is one of those people that, is, as you mentioned, he kind of is the face of that party. And so, yeah, I mean, depending on how, what the sentencing ends up being, this could be a way to get him out of their hair, I should say, and make their lives a little bit easier, because he does often act as a thorn in their side to the leadership there in South Africa, because he does call them out for all the things that we want all politicians to be called out when they're doing it. And so we will see what happens. It will be a very sad day if that's what they do, but we will find out. We'll find out. We'll watch this story closely and keep you guys posted. All right. So we are kind of going through these stories rapid fire because we're a little bit late today, and that's on me. And we have some pressing matters to attend to, but we still wanted to make sure you guys got this live stream. So, obviously put your comments in the chat. Definitely comment on, the replay as it gets posted. All right, so moving on to the next story. The mystery deepens over missing Kenyan activists in Uganda. So there was a disappearance of 2 Kenyan activists in Uganda. Of course, Ugandan police deny holding them in their custody. And that was 6 days after they were reportedly abducted by armed men in security uniforms in Kampala, Uganda. The police spokesperson says that there are no formal reports of their abduction and that the 2 are not being pursued for any offense. In the meantime, 2 Ugandan lawyers have filed a habeas corpus application at the Kampala High Court, seeking to compel authorities to produce the missing activists. and reports, and then there are reports that the family members and human rights activists met with Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary in Uganda to seek answers over their whereabouts. So we will play a bit of this video and have some commentary on the other side.
Tonight we begin our bulletin with the growing mystery surrounding the disappearance of two Kenyan activists, Bob Njagi and Nicholas Oyo, whom Ugandan police now deny holding in their custody 6 days after they were reportedly abducted by armed men in security uniform in Kampala. Uganda police spokesperson Kituma Ruzoke says there is no formal reports of the abduction and that the two are not being pursued for any offense. In the meantime, two Ugandan lawyers have filed a habeas corpus application at the Kampala High Court seeking to compel authorities to produce the missing activist. And as the Gatete Njoroge now reports, family members and human rights activists met with Foreign Affairs Principal Secretary Korir Sing'oei in a bid to seek answers over their whereabouts.
6 days after their broad daylight abduction in Kampala, Uganda, authorities have finally broken their silence, sparking renewed concern over the rise of cross-border abductions in the East African region.
Good morning, our viewers.
Uganda police spokesperson Kituma Ruzoke, while addressing the media, defended the police, maintaining that the two missing individuals are not in their custody.
I don't have any information to the effect that they are in police custody, nor do I have any information that they are accused by police.
Now, maybe we should give some context to this story, right? So Bobi Wine, who's the opposition leader, young opposition leader in Uganda, to the current president, who has been there over 20 years, 30 years now at this point. I don't even know how long he's been in power.
Sorry, you're talking about Museveni?
Yes.
He's been there since 1986, I think.
Okay, so we're talking about almost 40 years. So as I was born in 84, so for context, I'm 41 years old, right? So almost my entire life. So Bobi Wine, young activist, political leader that has the hearts and minds of many young people in Uganda, who has been arrested recently and all kinds of other things happening to him. These two Kenyan activists traveled to Uganda allegedly in support of Bobi Wine, and they were allegedly abducted by security forces in broad daylight in Uganda. And so this story is kind of just following up on those discussions that happened about 7 or 8 days ago. I think it was reported. And so your thoughts on this story, Gloria?
My. We're beginning to see even more cross-border repression in East Africa, where activists who support opposition movements in neighboring countries are being targeted. These activists are affiliated with Free Kenya, and they joined Bobi Wine's campaign events earlier in Uganda. Now, what makes this really concerning is that the Ugandan government has not offered a clear explanation or even acknowledged detaining them. Just last year, Kizza Besigye was allegedly abducted from Nairobi to Uganda. I mean, that's to abduct somebody because of their support for opposition is alarming. Moves like this, often serve two purposes: to suppress dissent while sending signals to opposition movements that political activism bears personal risk across national lines. Not long ago, we talked about the prominent activists from Kenya and Uganda who traveled to Tanzania to observe the treason trial of opposition leader Tundu Lissu. They were reportedly arrested. They were not allowed any communication for several days before being released and deported to their countries. Following their release, both of them held a press conference in Nairobi where they recounted harrowing experiences of alleged torture and even essay. So there seems to be a violation of sovereignty, of human rights. There's a frightening effect on regional solidarity across East Africa. Even if these moves were indeed made in the interest of national security, as these governments claim, what we have been presented are a lack of transparency and lack of official acknowledgement, And these lean heavily toward concern about abuse of power. What will matter next is whether courts enforce accountability, whether there will be evidence, whether the regional community is going to treat this as a breach of human rights rather than an internal matter.
Yeah, well put. I mean, I think the only thing that I can add is, this sets a precedent, right? And this, there are many reasons why these things happen. And I think you touched on this in your statement. One, it is to deter other people from doing the same thing. And then I think the other element to this is this happens with the complicity or the agreement of the host country where these people are from, right? You notice that you don't hear anything from the leadership in Kenya about the abduction of 2 of their citizens in another country.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned, they're in opposition to the current government in Kenya. So what I see here is folks who feel that it is proper and right to abduct and use these kinds of scare tactics to prevent others from doing the same. We see that activism leads to change, and when it doesn't, it leads to forceful change, right? We saw that in the AES, and we saw that in Madagascar. Was it Morocco? Madagascar. Well, Madagascar is a whole different conversation we'll get to in a moment here. But, when you see that kind of change, I think it does strike fear in the hearts of some of these political leaders. And that is why they are taking the approach that they are. Gloria, I know that you have to go.
No, keep going. It's okay.
Okay, so there are 2 more stories that we want to cover today. Madagascar's change in leadership, and then also the ending of AGOA in Africa. And both of these are follow-ups to stories that we've done recently. And so we'll start with the Madagascar story. There was a Gen Z protest in Madagascar. Military general is primed to take over as the prime minister's job. And we're going to play this video and give some commentary on the other side.
Gen Z in Madagascar is unhappy with the appointment of a new prime minister.
Well, for the protesting youth, the call was for a complete political overhaul as a rally against government corruption.
Fresh protests broke out in the capital as the youth remained disappointed with the appointment of an army general as the new prime minister of Madagascar. Many call it a whitewash as they continue to demand the president's resignation and sweeping reform in government institutions.
A new prime minister? It's not a new prime minister we want, it's a change in the system. Is the prime minister going to come down here and take care of the Madagascans? No. What can he do? What is he going to change? What is he going to change in 6 months? I saw that the president gave him 6 months to assess his abilities.
So, and this reminds me of what happened in Kenya, right? And in Kenya, the protest that you guys might remember, we reported on and talked about at length, led to the president Ruto actually firing his entire cabinet, but he stayed in office. And those protests were calling for him to resign. And so the youth of Kenya are dissatisfied with that. What we're seeing here in Madagascar seems like a close parallel to that, where the president remains in power, installed a new prime minister, and it still seems as though the youth are still are not satisfied with that because they were asking for his resignation, and what he did was just install a new prime minister. From what it seems, your thoughts, Gloria, on this story?
And that's what concerns me about leadership in Africa. The pattern of dictatorship, of authoritarian rule that we've seen across the Africa becomes normal. It becomes normalized, and that's why I say leaders, get progressively worse throughout Africa, to where we look to the past and we romanticize certain leaders because it just keeps getting worse. When I think of a country like Nepal, if we're comparing the protests, if we're talking about Kenya with the Gen Zs, Nepal was Gen Zs, Morocco Madagascar, what you'll see is that Kenya kept going, fighting hard, did it in 2024, did it again in 2025. The man just refused to leave. In Nepal, on the other hand, I mean, it got to a point they did have to fight and they lost a lot as well. But at some point, the prime minister resigned, right? We don't have that happening in Africa. They will stay there, claim to reshuffle cabinets or whatever, but the issues are still there. So it's usually a way to just, and Ruto did the same thing, just a way to appease the protesters. But protesters, back to Madagascar, they're refusing the new appointment. They're demanding a full regime change rather than this superficial reshuffling. And I see why. What the president has done is he's blurring the boundary between military and civilian power because democratic institutions may be sidelined under the banner of stability. What unfolds next hinges on whether this president is going to allow parliamentary, judicial, and electoral commissions to operate independently. Whether the military's role remains restricted, we need to see that as well. And if protesters are going to, to maintain this momentum, is going to determine a whole lot. It's just heartbreaking that Africans who want better for themselves and for generations to come have to pay such a heavy price. And it's like, whatever, how does this ever end? What is the resolution? You think NSARS, how did it end? The same people are still in power.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll say this, there's always this conversation about the slippery slope argument, right? When unusual means are taken to get the result that you want, people who are bad faith actors can look to that to copy. So for example, many of us are in support of what's happening in the AES. Now, how that was done was through what we're calling, or many people call, a revolution, not a coup. Because it's saying the people wanted this takeover of power, but it was a military takeover of power, consolidation of power, changing parliamentary practices and putting things on pause. Well, now you have a leader in Madagascar who's actually using that blueprint, it seems, to be able to do something similar. And we will watch and see if that's what happens in Madagascar. So in the AES, where you had what most people are calling a revolution, and people are excited about it, in Madagascar, something similar is happening, but not from the people's lens, but from the top down. And they'll be able to operate and do some of the same things that we see in places where we support. And that's why people have that slippery slope argument. I think Gloria has mentioned previously that, when we see government takeovers, and that's something that I've cautioned against, is that, it's scary to be in a country when this attempt happens and when it happens. And also there can be negative consequences. And these are some of the negative consequences that we're speaking of, right? Other people can mimic these things and actually apply their own versions on this. And you see it all around the world, right? Pardoning of sons in the United States can lead to pardoning of other people in the next administration, right? Just keep that in mind. If you're thinking about, I'm not going to say any specific names in the US, but you see when someone does it where you may potentially agree with their politics, remember someone else who you disagree with may do the same thing. And so that's why military rule and military takeover can be a slippery slope, and it should be something we watch closely and hope that it doesn't need or is not the requirement for the change we're looking for on the continent, because there are many people who were military leaders that people did support who now end up being dictators 40 years later, 30 years later, and are taking those same military tactics into other countries, neighboring countries, stealing their resources or having the resources come to their countries. Figure out who I'm talking about. It's happening in the same region as we had talked about earlier today in Eastern Africa. And so that happens, and they may no longer be wearing their military uniforms. They wear suits now, and they speak eloquently, but they are still, and they may even wear glasses, but they still are committing crimes, war crimes, and it's internationally recognized. And so I'm speaking about East Africa, to be clear. We're not talking about the AES here, but what I'm saying is just be very clear that these kinds of military takeovers that happen in places where we may support can be replicated in places that we don't support. So I just want to caution everybody who is watching these stories. Okay, final story that we will talk about today. There's some others that you guys can check out for yourselves that are in the description. But this one is the African Growth Opportunity Act, Africa Growth and Opportunity Act. AGOA is also what it's called. It is expiring. Now, the Trump administration has hinted at extending it. And this is one of those things that we've talked about here in terms of Africa's dependency on the West, right? And so, you know, we'll play this video for a bit. It is a rather lengthy video, so we won't play the whole thing, but we will have some commentary on the other side.
And Opportunity Act, or AGOA. This U.S. initiative has provided duty-free access for African goods to the American market for years. But the plan expired on the 30th of September, raising concerns that President Donald Trump's administration may not renew it. However, officials have reportedly hinted at a one-year extension. According to reports, a White House official has said that the Trump administration supports a one-year extension of AGOA. Since taking office in January, the administration had not publicly stated a position on the act. AGOA has been a landmark trade agreement for 25 years, granting duty-free access to the U.S. market for several African products. At least 32 African nations have been eligible for preferential treatment under the program. Top exports include crude oil, motor vehicles, apparel, jewelry, citrus fruits, and more. South Africa has been the top beneficiary, followed by Nigeria and Kenya. AGOA has also been instrumental in job creation across sectors. For example, in Kenya, approximately 66,000 workers are employed in the apparel sector. In Lesotho, around 45,000 workers are in the apparel industry. And in South Africa, about 30,000 workers are in the automotive sector. So the expiration of AGOA puts thousands of jobs and businesses at risk.
So, you know, important to note how many jobs this program has been responsible for, right? I mean, we just in 3 countries, they're talking about over 100,000 jobs, right? And this is absolutely a landmark deal that was done 25 years ago that really did have a tremendous impact. 3 of the countries that you saw there, South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria, are also the 3 biggest economies in Africa, and largely in part and due to this deal. So as we've talked about previously, right, we want to see more inter-Africa trade, but we do see that this AGOA deal has been really useful. And then, of course, tariffs and other things have taken dents into this, or put a dent into this deal. But your thoughts on the expiration and potential maybe 1-year renewal, but then not the 1-year extension, but not the actual continual renewal?
Yeah, so AGOA was actually legislated under the Clinton administration, as you said, 25 years ago. And the aim was for the U.S. to have a tool of economic diplomacy to help encourage U.S.-Africa trade, to encourage reforms, and to counter, this is really important, to counter rising influence from other global powers. Estimates suggest, now to the implication of, you know, Trump's decision to end it, estimates suggest that AGOA-dependent industries may lose up to 1.3 million jobs across Africa if there's no replacement or if there's no extension being secured. Now we have a whole year. Some countries, in spite of this, are now projecting export declines of 8.7% by 2029 due to this shift. Some factories in Kenya already say they will lay off, you know, hundreds of workers or more, at least 1,000. Countries that heavily depend on apparel, horticulture, agro exports to the US are facing greater shock because AGOA also served as a geopolitical balance between China's rising influence. This move by Trump has actually opened space for China, for India, for the EU, and for other countries to deepen their leverage in Africa. Without rapid legislative revival or an alternative framework, while the one-year extension seems like some sort of relief, many export sectors, particularly in textile and agriculture, will struggle or even collapse. So now to African governments, listen, the clock is ticking, okay? You have to moderate this damage and you have to renegotiate new trade terms. As we've said many times on this show, you have to start looking to trade within regions. We have to expand this. I mean, these are, we're talking about South Africa, Kenya, Nigeria. These are powerful countries economically that could do things, make moves regionally, among themselves. But yeah, we'll keep our eyes on this one. I'm excited, for the relief, but I'm also concerned about what will happen afterwards. Maybe it's just buying us some time.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so, I think Pittsburgh Dude 87 says the goal of the Clinton administration was to exploit cheap African labor to maximize profits for American corporations, and the same in China as well. You saw the United States under Clinton. When he left office, America had a surplus. Now America is almost $30 trillion in debt. I don't know what the number is today. After 2 wars, in Afghanistan, in Iraq as well, and in others. So yeah, maybe so. But with that, you saw a strengthening of a China middle class and a growth of China, like an accelerated growth of China. And then you've also seen the similar kind of growth in Africa. So even though it was exploitative, cheap labor for American companies, it was also an opportunity to accelerate the growth and job market for many who did not have them previously. I do think that these countries should apply what Gloria said and, take what has come from these industries built, these factories that were producing, and find other ways and other places to sell those goods. Because there are plenty of other consumer societies, nothing like the United States for sure, but there are other places around the continent that these products and services can be shared and sold to. And we just need more intercontinental trade, as you mentioned. So not much more to add there. We are at time, and we were actually very, very late. Did you have something you wanted to add?
Do you have time for the headlines? I can.
Okay, if you can.
But we can just run through them very quickly.
Let's do that then. So we have some headlines we can run through. So let's do that, and then we will let you guys go for the day. But before we do, I do want to shout out Jada. Jada has been a big support and sent that super sticker. So shout out to Jada, and I also, Jada, I saw your Cash App too. Jada is helping to support the channel, so appreciate Jada. I did have a consultation with her about her travel to Sierra Leone, so I look forward to hearing from you on that. And she also supports your channel as well, Gloria.
I am monetized, by the way. I'm a YouTube partner.
Yeah, so Gloria is a YouTube partner. But Jada's also shouting you out because she's a big fan of your channel as well. So I just wanted to shout her out because she took the extra step to support financially. We don't ask a lot. We don't really ask for that on these live streams often, but if you want to, feel free to. I mean, all that information you can find in our descriptions. You can find us, and you know where to do that.
We will not find any of your support.
I will not. Absolutely not. It's necessary. You have no idea how much I spend monthly to keep this operation afloat. The stories from around the world, around the continent, excuse me. So we put some of them in the description. Feel free to pick and choose in what order you'd like to go through them. So yeah, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, Ali Kushaib, a former Janjaweed commander, has been convicted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes and crimes against humanity committed during the Darfur conflict in Sudan between 2003 and 2004. So the court found him guilty of arranging widespread attacks on civilians, including unalivements, essays, forced displacement, Yeah, so that's what's going on. And why this is significant is that at least we're seeing some sort of accountability for victims of the Darfur genocide, which claimed over 300,000 lives and displaced millions.
Yeah, I mean, finally, someone coming to, you know, I guess the I guess the word I'm looking for is justice to some degree is prevailing. All right, any other stories?
Morocco again is still in the news because the Gen Z-led protests have, as you know, erupted as we discussed last week. They've erupted in several cities over what demonstrators are calling misplaced national priorities. You know, young people, Gen Zs, have criticized the government's heavy investment in international sporting events such as the 2030 FIFA World Cup and this year's Africa Cup of Nations. So they're fighting for basic sectors such as education and healthcare because those sectors remain underfunded. And the government has been still cracking down on these people. Very disappointing.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll continue to watch what happens there. I mean, I love to see people using their civic, you know, I guess the word is civic disobedience. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens when this is all said and done. I hope we see some change there in Morocco. Yes.
Philadelphia, there's actually a pastor of the Africa Town Church. There's a town in Philadelphia known as Africa Town. Anyway, this pastor has emerged as a defiant protector of undocumented African immigrants that are facing aggressive ICE raids. So he's actually refused to open church doors to federal agents, even under pressure. And he has people from Liberia, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and he has said, no way, he's standing, he's very defiant. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one for me because, of course, as someone who is a child of immigrants and who supports immigration heavily, I get worried because, you know, you're in open defiance publicly, right, makes you a target for, you know, because at the end of the day, it's still technically illegal according to, now, slavery was legal. Doesn't mean it should be illegal, but it is. Right. So to be clear, you know, at one point in time, Jim Crow was legal. Slavery was legal. It doesn't make it right, but they were. It is illegal to harbor those who have overstayed visas or who aren't on any paperwork. And so I fear for how the militarized ICE will approach this. You know, we've seen all kinds of videos of people being slammed to the ground, beaten, taken into custody, American citizens, or those who aren't American citizens. I mean, in general, the due process is required, but not utilized, right? So I fear for that. And I wish something like this was kept silent and kept it to himself, right? Because I think if you're going to take that stance, you're only putting a bullseye on your back. And when I say bullseye, I mean it literally, right? And I say on your back literally, because they will apply all force they deem necessary. So I'm very concerned about that. And you know, I guess we'll watch this story closely and see what happens.
Yep, we'll keep our eye on that one. Andrew Cuomo is actually in the spotlight, and so is Uganda. So basically, former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has publicly criticized New York State Assemblyman Zoran Mandami for comments suggesting dual citizenship between Uganda and the United States should be accepted. Cuomo labeled Mandami's remarks as reckless, especially in the context of Uganda's recent political turbulence and President Museveni's long-standing regime. We've talked about Mamdani, who was actually born to Ugandan academic. So his father was a Ugandan academic, or and an Indian filmmaker, and he's faced scrutiny over his ties to Uganda despite his American citizenship. So this is really interesting. You know, we're talking diaspora identity, we're talking loyalty, just basically the complexities of dual nationality in politically fraught contexts.
Yeah, and so just real quickly on my thoughts on this. I mean, look, I understand any country that fears someone's dual loyalty. I just think you should apply it to everyone, not some, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, there are many people who do not have to disclose their dual citizenship. I am a dual citizen, just, full disclosure, of course. And many people you will see on this platform would be dual citizens, of course. And, we are proud of all of our identities. Maybe we're naturalized in one place and we were born in another. But look, here's what I will say. There are many others in political office who do not have to disclose any other citizenships. There's plenty of speculation of people who have dual citizenship to nations committing atrocities halfway across the world. We don't know who they are because it's not public record and they don't have to say it. But there are definitely political action committees that have many people who are of dual citizenship, who are investing significant amounts of money in campaigns of those who may only have U.S. citizenship. And they, of course, have the ear and the policies of those who are in office or who want to be in office. So I think we should apply that across the board if we're going to have that level of scrutiny for who's likely to be the next mayor of New York City. I'll leave it at that. I got a lot more to say there, but I'll leave it at that. I am a voter in New York City. I voted in the primaries and I will be voting in the general, and that's all I will say. But
and very passionate, apparently.
Very passionate. I'm not a fan of anyone who lies about mistakes that they make while in office, and even if it means that it's going to be a black eye on them because you made a mistake that led to the unaliving of multiple people, the most vulnerable of us in nursing homes, and you're clearly on emails where you can't tell me you didn't read the emails, you responded to those emails, you are on the email threads, and the other things they say are alleged. You and your brother just happen to be allegedly very friendly and handsy, with your brother with his boss at holiday parties, you with many people allegedly. So to then, call out dual citizenship or loyalty, there are many more problems you have, sir. So I'll just leave it at that. And I was a big supporter during the pandemic at one point in time. I thought this looked like leadership with the PowerPoints, et cetera, et cetera. But to find out what I found out afterwards, I'm very critical of that individual. So, that's my thoughts there.
And I do like that you're able to balance things. You're not just standing on a hill. Even when a certain leader is doing things incorrectly, you don't just stand on the hill forever. It's okay to say, you know what? Okay, I can't ride with you on this one. You know what I mean? That's how that's what integrity looks like. So well done.
Appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, I stand on principles. So, you just acknowledge it, accept it. Like, I made a mistake. I'm sorry people did. We did the best we did with the available information at the time. That's what you're supposed to do. And if that's what you did, that's what you just say. You don't deny it and lie and pretend that you didn't do that. And then the other stuff too. Anyway, who doesn't have those issues? Someone who they feel has dual loyalty to two different countries. So he may have other issues that you might have issues with, those who don't support, but those issues he doesn't have. Anyway, with that, I think that's the last story of the day. Was that the last one?
Well, just the whole thing going on in Malawi with Peter Mutharika being the new president. We talked about it last week.
Oh, yes. There was one more.
85-year-old leader who returned after previously holding the office until 2020. So yeah, but he's pledged to fight corruption.
Well, yeah, don't hold your breath, but yeah, I don't know much about what's happening in Malawi, so I can't speak to that. All I can say is, as we've talked about before, new leadership, many times younger leadership, but leadership that focuses on the will of the people is what's required on the continent. And so new leadership and younger leadership doesn't automatically mean reflective of the people. So I think it's those three things in combination, or at least two of those three, which the most important of those being the reflecting the will of the people. That's what we'd like to see in office. And so if that's not what we're seeing in Malawi, then we're hoping to see a change. So yeah, sorry, I was on my soapbox about the New York mayoral campaign.
I loved it. We need more. I'm gonna bring more stories like that.
Yeah. So also merch is coming soon, stolen from Africa. So stay tuned to this. As you can see, you know, the colonizers of some of our favorite countries have stuff still in their museums and in their vaults beneath their palaces. So the merch is coming soon. Stay tuned.
We're here for it. I want a couple. I want many. Give me many.
Well, I'll send you some actually.
Thanks. I hope you have different kinds, like, you know, the Benin bronzes, etc.
Yes, there's a lot more coming, stolen from Africa. There's also before slavery, doing a before slavery line as well. I guess I'm announcing it here. So more to come, though. More to come, and that speaks about the Moors, by the way, when I say before slavery. So yeah, there's a lot there to share in the coming weeks. So stay tuned. I happen to be wearing it today, you know, so I thought I would share it with you guys. But yeah, there's more to come. So
you know, your Moors video still keeps going viral.
Yeah, I keep hearing that.
Yeah, good job, Joe.
So more content to come on that, and more and definitely more merch, literally. Okay, so with that, I want to thank you guys all for watching. Apologies for the delay. Thank you for sticking with us. If you did stay this long, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to Gloria on YouTube and at the Gloria AO, which is right here. Subscribe to Authentic African if you're following on Gloria's side. Make sure you follow us on all the social media platforms. We're on all the social media platforms. It's in the description below. If you haven't already, share this with anybody you know who's curious about what's happening on the continent of Africa. Make sure you hit that like button, hit that thumbs up, so that we can make sure that this gets in front of more people. And comment if you haven't already your thoughts on any of the stories that we covered today. Thanks to those who were really involved in the chat today. We couldn't get to a lot of your comments. But yeah, we want to thank you all for joining. And with that, we won't be seeing you guys next Thursday, but we will be seeing you the following Thursday. I will be in somewhere. I don't know if I can say where I'll be. I will be in another country in Europe, actually, for the day job. So we will not be able to go live next week, but stay tuned for the following week. We'll talk about stories that happen between now and then. And with that, guys, thanks for watching. See you all in the next video. Bye, guys.